All right, well, it's 7:01, so let's get started. We have a lot to do here today. First off, we have Paul Levy here again. Some of you may have been here the last time he spoke to us in April. I think it came in April to talk about the new Centennial Exposition that's going to be in the Lit Brothers building. So he is the former president CEO of Center City District and is currently serving as the board chair of Center City District and heading up this initiative for this new Centennial Exposition. Was going to be really exciting. So he has new information to share with us. So let's give him a nice warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me back. And because this is the beginning of summer, I think this is summer reruns, right? You had me here before, but I hope to sort of bring you up to date on where we are, and then particularly end with invitation for people who might want to volunteer to be docents at this exhibit. So let me just quickly run through what it is. We're opening, just to put in perspective, on June 25th. So we're very close to when we're ready to open. Up. We're broadcasting abroad today too, to Europe and Australia, so we have to synchronize. All right. Okay. Okay, so again, thank you very much. So this is an exhibit that we've been working on, obviously, during the midst of all this celebration of 2026. We want to really look back at 1876. This is a time where we truly welcomed the world to the fair in Fairmount Park. This was the first World's Fair in North America, and it had 10 million visitors. And to put that in perspective, the total population of the US at that time was 46 million. So you get a sense of how big this was. There were visitors from 37 different countries. That's obviously Memorial Hall, which I'll be talking about. We had really generous funding from the Connolly Foundation, and we put together a group that included a group out at Drexel, the Lenfest Institute, worked with a local architect, ISA Architects, and then a group called Art Guild, which builds set designs and has really been fabricating a lot of this for us. We're going to be located in the historic Litz department store building. We're going to be on the ground floor in the corner at 8th and Market Street, which is obviously a very prime corridor for people coming from the visitor center. It is that space that I've shaded in. Brickstone Realty, the owner of the building, has donated all the space rent-free, has done a ton of work to support this exhibit in a really wonderful way. We funded the entire project with some really wonderful, generous donations, a series of major foundations, Connolly, the Philadelphia Funders Collaborative for the 250th, a local donor, the Acre Family Charitable Trust, Poor Richard's Charitable Trust, and you see a range of businesses, developers, and very excitingly, we had both the Electricians Union and the Carpenters donate almost all of the construction of the partitions and all the electrical work. So I've been really benefiting from that in a lot of different ways. As you know, this is just 2 blocks from Independence Hall. We're planning to be open from June 25th through the end of December at this point. This is a floor plan. Market Street is on the right, 8th Street is at the bottom, and you'll be able to walk in right off the street, and I'll talk you through the layout of this space in a moment. We'll be advertising on the digital rooftop screens that they have on this building. We will be putting up banners on the street along with all the other current banners that are out there. And those of you who know the history of this, while this was nominally to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the United States, this was really a huge manufacturing fair to celebrate America's coming of age and Philadelphia's coming of age as a huge manufacturing center. It celebrated technology, innovation, and consumer products. We were at that time the largest manufacturing center in North America, and we want to focus on the story of immigration from Europe and migration from the South and how that actually built the neighborhoods of the city. So this is very much how the city we know came into being. But it was the first demonstration of Alexander Graham Bell's telephone was shown here. It was the first demonstration of Remington's typewriter, and you could walk up and they would type out a letter that you could send home. I kind of call this Instagram 1876 style. But it was also this whole birth of the consumer economy. I had no idea when we started this. We were major manufacturing of toys, of dolls within the city. And so they were showing that off. It was the first time that popcorn was widely introduced to the public, the most important innovation of the 19th century, obviously. It was sold for 5 cents, but it was a huge innovation. Hires root beer and soda water was sold, and that facility you see on the left was a giant refrigerator so people could get cold Hires root beer and seltzer any time of day right in the middle of the fair. As you walk in, we have a giant digital screen that will be on the wall that I want to come back and talk about because it helps place the Centennial in the city and where it was in relationship to where you are when you're at 8th and Market Street. We're going to highlight all the various means that people took: boats, trains, and trolleys. I had no idea, but there were steamboats that left from the base of the waterworks and sailed you out to a dock up near the Centennial. But we also had the first monorail at a fair here. That's the bottom picture in the center, but really talking about all the communication or the transportation systems. We had 8 major hotels in what is today the Parkside neighborhood and 51 here in Center City. You see the size of some of these hotels. Glad Atlas Hotel holding up the world with 5,000 hotel rooms. I love the rates at the time, $2.50 a night. Now, even adjusted, that's $155 a night. So it was still fairly affordable to get here. There's some really interesting things. This is a cartoon that we'll show, which talks about how all these relatives came from across the country. Oh, your family's name is Jones? Well, I'm a relative. I want to stay in your house. So there's a lot of that going on. But there was also a version of Airbnb. People were renting out their houses cheaper than staying at hotels. And this thing on the right, I'm still puzzling about, but somebody patented a giant suitcase that when it opened up, you could use it as a portable bathtub because very few hotels had showers or bath. Now, where you filled it up with water, I have no idea, but we will find this out. But on a more serious level, we really want to convey a sense of the scale. This is an aerial view from atop the Mann Music Center. That is Memorial Hall that you see on the center left. That's almost the same view, and you really get a sense of the size of the Centennial. And everything off to the right is today the Parkside neighborhood. So all of that was part of the main exhibit. The scale of these buildings, the machinery hall, no surprise, was 1,876 feet long. That's a half a mile long building that was built. But there was tremendous diversity of architecture. We want to focus on the people who built the exhibit, the workers there, and there are lots of themes about inclusion and exclusion. This was largely a white working class. African-American laborers were not able to work in erecting the exhibit. They were in sort of hospitality jobs. Clearly, as you may know this story already, Elizabeth Duane Gillespie was the great-granddaughter of Ben Franklin, raised a ton of money for the Centennial, and then was told, sorry, there can't be a women's pavilion. And so she raised money. They built their own women's pavilion on the fairgrounds. This was really the first major public airing of a lot of the efforts for women suffragists. They actually crashed the event down here at Independence Hall at the reading of the Declaration of Independence. So inclusion and exclusion. And we want to tell the stories about Frederick Douglass, who had been invited multiple times to the White House when Lincoln was president, was invited to the fair, blocked by the Philadelphia police, and only then recognized by another elected official, invited up on the stage, but not invited to speak. So inclusion, exclusion is going to be a theme through this. We want to focus on 6 major buildings at the fair, and those reddish brick color structures are pavilions that we're building, not to echo, but to simulate really what these buildings were like. And so you will walk into them. There'll be graphics on tables, graphics on the walls. There'll be large tables with different information on them. This is these pavilions being built right now, and they'll be delivered in the next 2 weeks. So if you look on the right, if you can see this right in the seam, it's the size of an individual. These are 8 to 9 feet tall. And we'll have large super graphics on the wall at different scales. And the way this will be designed, that you'll look through one of these pavilions, and on the wall will be the same building 6 to 7 feet away. So you get the illusion that you're looking through a long corridor and seeing the building there. So a lot of really good thinking by the design team here. We want to draw a lot of connections to Philadelphia today. We don't want to just be looking at 1776. And so we will obviously talk about how Memorial Hall is the first art gallery, now Please Touch Museum. I think you all know they have a toy version of the Statue of Liberty arm that was erected essentially to raise money. And then there were a series of statues of the Statue of Liberty made without her arm, which was part of the fundraising. We will have one of those at the exhibit itself. And then obviously we want to talk about this as a major destination for children, one of the few places in the city, the only place in the city where you can see a full-scale model of the entire Centennial. We want to connect people to other destinations, the Philadelphia Art Museum, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, which opened in time for this, send people to the Franklin Institute where there were Baldwin locomotives there, talk about Cato and his role, and send people to the statue at City Hall, direct them to Mother Bethel Church. There's a whole story about there was a huge statue of Richard Allen that was fabricated to be shown at the fair, damaged in a train wreck and only brought at the end, and only the bust survived. That bust is at Mother Bethel today. So we want to direct people there with these connections, send people to the African American Museum. There's a whole panorama of 1776 to 1876. At the front desk, we're going to staff this with professional. Allied Security is going to give us like a building hotel concierge that will be there at all times. Drexel's working on a set of work-study students. And one of the things I want to close with here is inviting people who are interested in being docents on the floor as well. We're going to use an existing structure up front, both as a display case and the welcome desk. We'll welcome people. This is a free exhibit. And we will have AT&T is giving us one of the simulated recreations of the original telephone. We'll have lots of the original parts of telephones. And that digital screen I alluded to is on the wall as you walk in. This is it being installed, so you get a sense of the size of this. So if we want to watch the Super Bowl there later in the year, we can do that as well. But what this will do is we have commissioned a drone flyover of Philadelphia today that starts at Independence Hall, flies up Market East, over City Hall, up the Parkway, over the waterworks, and up to the fairgrounds. And into that, we are inserting historical images at that same perspective. But what we did is have all those historical images and gave them to the drone pilot to say, reproduce that exact angle. So this doesn't give you a full sense of how it will work, but will open with an image like this and fade into the same view in 1876. We will show the Centennial, Independence Hall on opening day. This is a view looking east from 7th and Market. That's the same view on opening day. So these will fade into each other. We'll take people up West Market, Wanamaker Building, which opened in time, the Wanamaker Building today. We will go over City Hall. This is what it looked like in 1876, and then talk about the building of City Hall itself, up the Parkway, which didn't exist at that time. That was 1908 to 1918, up to the waterworks, and tell a little bit about this remarkable site where water was pumped up, obviously, from the Schuylkill to a large reservoir at the top of Fairmount, obviously connecting that to today's art museum, which inherited the whole collection from Memorial Hall. So the flyover then ends at the Centennial Fairgrounds, and on the walls and in the video, we'll have then and now images like this. So this isn't just something in the past. We want people to connect it to today. So our goal here to wrap up is to create a major new destination on Market East. We're looking to open as I said, on June 25th, the idea is connect 2026 to 1876. We're talking about Monday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., closed on Sundays. And like to stay open through the end of December. We'll figure out how that goes and what interest level there are. But it's part of a broader effort that the Center City District's been on, trying to clean up Market East, put temporary retail in, and make this street, which is not ready for prime time, much more active as we go forward. So that's a very quick overview. We really welcome volunteers who want to be docents at this site. We have posted online a sign-up form for people. This is a QR code that I can get to Marianne so she can circulate it for those who are not fast enough with your cameras. But this will take you to the website. We're still updating the website in terms of having current information, but we're very much looking forward to having both professional staff, docent staff, work study students to help interpret this and really celebrate what we accomplished and the things we didn't do so well in 1876. So that's a quick overview. And any other questions you have? Thank you. Sure.
What's the website?
Revisit1876.com. Real simple. Revisit1876.com. Oh, sorry. Website is revisit1876.com. I will say if you go to that site, it's not quite ready for prime time. It's begging for money stage still. If you get inspired and still want to contribute, but within the week, it will switch over to the basic information. Other questions? Okay.
I don't know. I think that someone Jude said great work.
Oh, thank you very much. Good.
Will it have every house to represent every state architectural style in that exhibit? And will you have Ammonia Lewis's hand carved in marble, The Death of Cleopatra, which was also on display at that exhibit?
Yeah. I didn't get the first question. Let me answer the second one. We will have images and narrative about the death of Cleopatra, as well as other artwork that was there, for sure, because that was one of the few African-American artists' works of art that was shown there. What was your first question?
There was one house built to represent the architectural style of every state of the United States in 1876. The only one left is the Ohio House,
right,
to represent Sarah and Richard Smith, which has the Smith family playground.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Ohio House and talk about the states. I don't think we really have replicas or images on every single state. Great. Other question in the back? Sure.
Well, maybe it's too early to know, but when you're asking for docents, are you looking for like people who would be there for a whole day?
That's a great
hourly.
All right. So the way we've set up that I'll make sure that Marianne, I think you have it already, but we'll make sure we can circulate the QR code. What you'll see in that survey, it asks those questions. You know, can you do 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day? I mean, we just need to understand. I mean, this is my first experience in doing something like this. I have no idea how many people step forward, whether people say I can only do a half hour a day, whether somebody says I love to do 4 hours or 8 hours. So I'm in the beggars can't be choosers mode at this point. Tell us what you're interested in doing, and then we'll try to schedule.
One last. Is there a reason why you're closed on Sunday?
We've talked to a lot of people with exhibits, and they said like that the attendance is relatively slow. I mean, we thought about closing Monday, but then with the games and all the other activity here, we thought that was the best. I mean, there's nothing cast in stone. As I said, the thing that is, really been interesting for me is people who are passionate about this are passionate about this. I don't know how big that universe is. So if we find that people want to see it more, we can open more. If we need to trim back hours, we'll just play it by ear. But we've got this very generous rent-free, all utilities paid from Brickstone. So it gives us flexibility. Yeah.
Do you have Parkside Avenue in the exhibit?
Well, Parkside Avenue really didn't exist. It was part of the fairgrounds. Right.
But that was where the Africans were celebrating the 1876 centennial, because they weren't allowed in the actual park.
Right. Well, not completely true. Essentially, a certain number of the African-American middle-class population came, but the number of people who attended of African-American descent was very small. This was really, sadly, very much a white event. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks. If you've ended the rain for me outside, that would be perfect because I'm going home. Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Okay.
All right. Another thank you to Paul for leaving here. Perfect timing. Okay. So, oh. Okay, we'll set. All right. Let's give him a minute to set up for the next speaker, and then I'll tell you who it is. Just got to switch the. Oh, yeah. So if you did not sign the attendance sheet here with Jim in the red shirt, Jim Murphy is taking attendance. You got Rob. Yeah. So make sure you're on the attendance sheet. Ernest is looking for a step on tour guide. 11 to 1 on Saturday. $90 with a $20 tip. So anybody email me and I'll forward it to Ernest if you're available. Saturday, 11 to 1. What is your tour? Just Center City? Just Center City, regular stuff. You're doing a podcast? My Philly Lawyer. So Ernest is going to be in a podcast, My Philly Lawyer. So send me the link when it's done, when it's up. And we'll put it in the newsletter for everybody. All right. So did you guys already work out how you're going to?
Yeah.
Okay. Peggy's going to come sit over here. That's going to come up here. Oh, guys, little delay here to switch over the technology. All right, watch your dress there, Peggy. I'm going to move this up a little. Okay. Okay, so tonight we have scholar and historian Ned Donoghue, who will speak on his book, Prisoners of Congress, Philadelphia's Quakers in Exile, 1777 to 1778, which uncovers a Revolutionary War story that is mostly forgotten today. Norman E. Ned Donoghue, the second, grew up in Westchester and graduated from Williams College and Duke Law School. For 34 years, he practiced law as a partner at Deckert, and served 5 years as a founding fundraiser for both the Princess Grace Foundation USA in New York City and on staff for the Philadelphia Orchestra Association. Ned writes as an independent scholar historian. His prime focus has been pacifists during the American Revolution, but he has recently widened his scope to write a manuscript about Woodrow Wilson. Ned lives in Philadelphia and on the eastern shore of Maryland. So let's give a nice warm welcome to Ned Donoghue.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm really delighted to be here. I'm wondering, is I on a slope or what? All right. You guys are the face of public history in Philadelphia, and I salute you because what we write about gets translated by you to the audience, and that's awesome. So I'm going to start with when I turned 50 in 1994, I read Philadelphian Catherine Drinker Bowen's memoir, Family Portrait. She related that her father, Henry Drinker, born in 1850, a brilliant lawyer and engineer, president of Lehigh University at the turn of the last century, and an Episcopalian, was descended from a Quaker, Henry Drinker, born in 1734, later to become a central figure in my book. To Bowen's father's great chagrin, this earlier Henry Drinker and 19 others had been exiled from Philadelphia to Virginia for refusing to bear arms in the Revolution, she wrote. This statement confounded me. I knew it had to be for doing much more than just that. Contemporary Pennsylvanians knew that the Quakers were pacifists, but I filed Bowen's comment away for investigation, which came 20 years later. During the Revolutionary War, most people knew about the Quaker exile, but they only knew a small sliver of it. Until now, no historian has published a comprehensive scholarly examination of the extended Quaker exile episode, and only a rare few scholars have known a fraction of what this book reveals. Politics and religion are a volatile combination, whether in 2026 or in 1777. The same is particularly true when individual civil liberties come into conflict with a perceived threat to national security. These conflicts are at the core of the narrative here. Long the preeminent power in Pennsylvania, in 1776, the Quakers found themselves out of step with revolutionary sentiments. Though the general population was well aware of their refusal to bear arms, to patriot leaders, this minority religious sect, comprising then only 15% of the population of the city, now constituted a serious, persistent, and perhaps existential security threat to the new republic and the state in which they lived. On September 11th, 1777, the Second Continental Congress and the government of the newly organized state of Pennsylvania exiled 20 men. 17 of the exiles were Quakers. 2 were former Quakers who had been disowned, and 1 was a never Quaker. Their objections to the revolution and the war were sincere, religiously rooted, and courageous. Though they were never formally accused or convicted of any crime, the exiles were arrested and summarily banished, denied any chance to be heard in their own defense for an indefinite period to a frontier village in Virginia. They were also stripped of traditional rights held sacred for centuries, particularly that bundle of rights embodied by habeas corpus, the right to be heard by an impartial judge and released if he found them to be illegally arrested, which the Quakers strongly believed was the case. You may find some resonance with current events. Now, if I may jump to the darkest hours of their imprisonment, a passage from Prisoners of Congress. The last days of February 1778 brought rain, snow, hail, and ice to the frontier town of Winchester, Virginia, where a group of Quaker men had been held since their banishment from Philadelphia 6 months earlier. Illness proliferated, and relief was unlikely to arrive in time, even for those exiles who, like Henry Drinker, suffered relatively minor afflictions. On March 2, Thomas Gilpin, a 50-year-old husband, father, milling entrepreneur, merchant, and scientist, whose invention of a hydraulic pump had delighted Benjamin Franklin, became the first of the Quaker exiles to die. Days later, a second exile, 62-year-old Quaker minister John Hunt, experienced a mortification of one leg. It had suddenly lost all utility. Doctors concluded that amputation was the only way to save Hunt's life. When it came time to perform the operation, the only surgeon available had a curious history of inebriation, and unlike the pacifist Hunt, had served as a major general in George Washington's army. Adam Stephen. Hunt survived the operation without anesthetic, and his condition briefly seemed to improve. He too, however, would die before the month was out. March 1778 represented the absolute nadir of the Quaker sect's 96 years of political life in Pennsylvania. After nearly a century as the predominant cultural force in the colony and state, its members were out of office, out of influence, and out of business. Some struggled to survive out of their native state, where they were out of supplies and nearly out of luck. They were at the lowest ebb of their powers. Although in some senses they had never felt so helpless, the Quakers remained stalwart in their faith and strict in their religious principles. John Hunt, a pious man, had prepared himself for martyrdom. Still, he must have wondered as he lay dying how he and his co-religionists, who had not been accused of any crimes by either the Continental Congress or the Supreme Executive Council of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, had ended up in this situation and how it would all end. The questions raised by this book are many, but major ones where civil liberties conflict with national security are these questions which the drinkers, Henry and Elizabeth, surely faced. Number one, first, what can you do when your city is about to be invaded by the most effective army in the Western Hemisphere, and among your neighbors you suspect but cannot prove there may be powerful men who favor the enemy, and they've told you that they are neutral? Secondly, what duties do citizens owe their duly elected government, and what level of protection of the law does that government owe to supposed citizens who refuse it any show of allegiance and refuse to share in its burdens by paying taxes, claiming they were emitted for the purpose of war? Third, can people claiming the moral high ground by insisting they were just following strict religious principles expect others to ignore the political implications of their actions? Fourth, to what extent do governments have the right during wartime to restrict the rights of certain groups when they feel it necessary for public safety and/or national security? This was indeed a confusing time, illustrating what historian Gary Nash called the messiness of the American Revolution. Time to meet the characters. Prisoners of Congress tells this story of the American Revolution in Philadelphia from the vantage point of 4 Quaker families affected by the Exile, the drinkers and 3 other families. Each family was headed by a man who was esteemed as a leader among the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and also a transatlantic merchant with ships sending things to London and accepting things back. A business leader of the community, a man who employed dozens, if not hundreds, of people. They were among the elite merchants of Philadelphia. The Pembertons included Israel Pemberton, a transatlantic merchant and activist active in trading with the Native Americans. Here, in a political cartoon suggesting sexual indiscretions with a Native American woman from 1764. His brother James, also a transatlantic merchant and a politician, and John, his younger brother, Quaker minister and transatlantic merchant who bonded with Henry Drinker during the Exile and became a close friend. Samuel Pleasance, transatlantic merchant who married Mary Pemberton, Israel's daughter. And the Fisher family, Thomas and Myers Fisher, and their brother Samuel Rowland Fisher, all 3 of them exiled. This is the sister-in-law, Sarah R. Fisher, married to Quaker exile Myers Fisher. And of course, the drinkers. Henry Drinker, a brilliant transatlantic merchant and an ironmaster. He owned an iron mine over in New Jersey. And he owned ships, warehouses, counting houses, and his wife was Elizabeth Drinker, mother of 5 young children, and a woman, as you all know probably, who kept a diary for 49 years. She wrote down the name of every visitor to the home, observed people and events carefully for 49 years. When published, that diary came to 2,200 pages in 3 volumes. And on page 1677, she mentions my ancestor, who was a German immigrant, who she invited in for breakfast with the family so he could pay Henry the balance of the mortgage. Supporters of the exiles included John Parrish, a brush maker, Owen Jones, the last treasurer of the Pennsylvania colony, and Isaac Zane, a master builder. You might notice a dress code here that you could spot a Quaker on the streets. Most patriots recognized the Quaker peace testimony as a valid reason for exempting Quakers from military service. But now the military, forming to defend the city, insisted that the pacifists pay for that privilege. Quakers, however, adamantly refused to pay up or to participate in the common defense of the city, state, and nation in more than a dozen documented ways. They rejected the continental currency. They refused to affirm their allegiance to the new government. They even refused the government's request that they donate blankets for the soldiers, for which compensation was offered to comfort the soldiers who were sleeping in nearby camps, all the better to fight the next day. This may have been a tipping point. They refused as well to yield up the lead weights in their tall case clocks and their gutters, which could be made into bullets. Quakers also continued to sing the praises of their history of prosperity within the British Empire, never evincing any interest in changing the colony's status, certainly not in a violent way, all to the increasing anger and resentment of fellow citizens. Quakers tested the patience of their patriot neighbors. In the summer of 1777, Quaker sufferings mounted when the patriots periodically declared a day of fast to celebrate a win or to take pride in what they had done. Quakers refused to participate. As a matter of fact, they had never engaged in any such celebrations, even in colonial times. On July 4th, 1777, the first anniversary of independence, the city at night was illuminated, with patriots everywhere placing lit candles in their windows. This cadre of Quaker leaders, however, believed that the patriots had illegally usurped the positions of the rightful British government, and they did not illuminate their windows. Dark windows became a sign of a Quaker family that was not celebrating, a provocation to patriots, and possibly another tipping point. On that night, nearly 100 window panes were smashed by hooligans at the home of the drinkers and other Quaker families. As overzealous patriots rioted outside his home, future exile Elijah Brown remembered that it was as if he were in a jail, hourly woken by the clanking of chains. The disturbances that night likely spawned in his son, Charles Brockden Brown, then age 6, the seeds of the nation's first Gothic novels he would write in ensuing decades. It was a scary night for these peaceful dissidents and their families. The British landed, as you know, at the northern tip of the Chesapeake with 15,000 forces. Later that summer, John Hancock of the Continental Congress received a letter from Major General John Sullivan of New Hampshire, who claimed to have evidence that Quaker members of the Spanktown Yearly Meeting in Rahway, New Jersey, had purportedly transmitted military intelligence to the British. But it was not true, and they were forged papers made to look like Quaker papers. A Spanktown Yearly Meeting did not even exist, and they were not written in the consistent Quaker style. Yet they became the pretext for an attack against all Quakers in America. Congress insisted the Spanktown papers be printed in all the newspapers, along with Quaker internal policy statements that made them look as if they might be acting hostile to the new order of things. The Patriots refused to afford the Quakers even a basic hearing, nor could the Quakers manage to have a rebuttal printed. Patriots framed the Quakers with this fake news. Responding to the Spanktown papers, Congress charged a 3-man committee on spies, the most important member of which was John Adams, to consider Sullivan's charges. Its hastily composed report by 3 lawyers, delivered to the full Congress later that same day, did not uncover who had written the Spanktown papers, but instead merely concluded, most likely on preconceived notions, that a large number of Quakers were enemies to America, who, if given the chance, would surely collude with the British to undermine the Patriot cause. Translated into today's language, the committee identified these men as a serious threat to national security. The quickly assembled report went on to recommend that 11 named Quaker men in Philadelphia be arrested and confined and their political papers seized. The following day, Congress recommended the Pennsylvania Executive Council to apprehend and secure the 11 men Adams' committee had named. The Pennsylvania Council added 30 names to the list and eventually decided to arrest 41 men, 3/4 of which were Quakers. But in none of the cases did it allege any specific act worthy of arrest. Indeed, no direct accusations of criminality were ever made. Nonetheless, the arrests began on September 2 with general warrants signed not by a judge, but by the council, which was the executive of Pennsylvania. So questions of executive overreach creep into the story. In an unusual move, the council chose a specially assembled group of 25 militia members instead of the sheriff to carry out the arrests. Where have you heard that before? Suggesting that the members of this committee understood the irregular nature of these arrests. Among the militia officers in the arresting party was an outstanding figure in Philadelphia history. Assigned to execute the arrest warrant against Quaker minister John Pemberton was Captain Charles Wilson Peale, the famous portrait painter who later founded the first museum in Philadelphia. He thought what the arresting party was doing was so irregular that he tried to justify his actions in his diary, which still exists, to tell us what he felt in this highly irregular proceeding. Months later, he was to physically eject from her house the wife of the chief loyalist, Grace Groudon Galloway, so the Patriots could use the house for diplomatic purposes. The arresting party offered to many of its targets the first of several oaths, any one of which, had the Quakers been willing to sign them, would have allowed them to avoid arrest. Soldiers searched the prisoners' desks for political papers, sometimes smashing the desk. They seized some Quaker testimonies and minutes. They took the minute book of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting from Henry Drinker's desk, as well as some additional public papers found on John Hunt and John Pemberton. The arresting party was also instructed to confiscate all firearms, swords, and bayonets found on the prisoners. Of course, no such weapons were found among any of the men to be arrested. At least one man, John Pemberton, who Tom Paine called a traitor, resisted arrest and had to be physically lifted from his chair and physically carried from his home. This was his manner of passive resistance. From the Freemasons' Lodge, where the men were confined for 9 days pending exile, the prisoners protested their treatment from several angles. First, they argued that the arrest warrants, which noted only that the men had, quote, evidenced a disposition hostile to the cause of America, and specified no crimes. They were insufficient under the newly adopted Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776. Clearly, these were illegal arrests. The Quakers also pleaded repeatedly for a hearing at which they could explain and defend themselves. My book carries on the frontispiece the final page of one of their eloquent protests with this plea. We again repeat our pressing demand to be informed of the cause of our confinement and to have a hearing in the face of our country before whom we shall either stand acquitted or condemned. Followed by 22 signatures, it is an interesting parallel to those on the Declaration of Independence. I call this the Declaration of Quaker Protest. At the State House, the Continental Congress debated 9.5 hours what to do with the Quaker leaders, while the Pennsylvania authorities debated the Quakers' fate for a similar period. You know, the Pennsylvania authorities were on the second floor of Independence Hall. Congress was down below in the assembly room. So they were both thinking about the Quakers quite a bit that week. Their opponents, however, were unmoved and cunning. Members of Congress divested themselves of this responsibility by arguing that only the state could conduct such a hearing. Pennsylvania authorities, meanwhile, insisted that the imprisoned men were under the jurisdiction of Congress. Previous historians have made much of the persecuted feelings of Quakers at this time. None, however, has yet been able to shine a light on the intense and desperate political plans by patriots to illegally suppress, punish, and sideline the Quaker leaders. What it amounted to was patriots borrowing from the authoritarian playbook of the enemy, Parliament in London. They borrowed techniques that in previous centuries were used by Parliament to support divine right monarchs. There's nobody in this country who would want to be a divine right monarch, right? Their techniques included preventive detention, covered by the only suspension of habeas corpus law in Pennsylvania's 245-year history. Bills of attainder, a notorious shortcut way of charging someone with treason. An ex post facto law, illegal arrests by the militia and not the sheriff, and without a proper warrant. Political chicanery, bullying, intimidation, obfuscation coordinated between two levels of government, seizure of goods, and fake news, the Spanktown Papers. Patriots effectively triple silenced the Quakers, refusing them a hearing by Congress, the state, and the courts. By September 9, Congress ordered that the men be escorted by Pennsylvania militia guards to Virginia for an indefinite period of confinement. Late in the afternoon of September 11, the same day as the Battle of Brandywine, one of the longest and largest of the 8-year war just 40 miles from the city, wives and children of the Quakers wept profusely as the men were forced into wagons and carted away, led by armed guards, while patriots jeered these men deemed hostile to the government of the city and the new republic. A 16-year-old Quaker boy wrote of his stepfather and others taken away. They were dragged by a licentious mob from their near and dear connections, and by the hand of lawless power, banished from their country, unheard, perhaps never more to return. Of the government authorities and Congress, this boy cried, "Thou hast denied them in a manner more tyrannical and cruel than the Inquisition of Spain." Maybe a little hyperbole. Despite any discomfort its members may have felt, both Congress and the Council remained intransigent for 6 more months, rebuffing the over 35 times the Quakers protested. Ultimately, it took not only the persistent activism of over 150 named Quakers, but also a sympathetic nudge from George Washington to tip the scales in favor of release. Unique among the many activist Quakers were the actions of 18 women, wives, mothers, and sisters of the exiles. They rejected the text of a petition drafted by a male Quaker lawyer and instead drafted one themselves. The text, reproduced in the book as an appendix, is extraordinary in how its gendered tone differs from the many unsuccessful petitions drafted by the men. The book recounts how 4 of the Quaker women selected by the group turn a proposed trip to bring medical supplies to their confined husbands, sons, and brothers into a political mission to rescue the men. The 4 women whose names should be remembered are Susanna Suki Jones, Phoebe Pemberton, Mary Pemberton Pleasance, and Elizabeth Sandwith Drinker. They hand-delivered their petition to General Washington at Valley Forge and to Pennsylvania authorities at Lancaster by traveling through the soldiers' lines of not one, but 2 armies. By the way, Henry and Elizabeth Drinker had exchanged 65 letters during the exile. Elizabeth here in the city at her home nearby, and Henry in Virginia. How they got those letters through the lines by personal friends carrying them and Quaker meetings helping them out is not to be believed. But those 65 letters are at the Haverford College Library in the special Quaker section. At the encampment of Valley Forge, Commander-in-Chief George Washington, having been briefed by his security staff on this unusual delegation, received them cordially. Indeed, invited the 4 Quaker women to join his afternoon luncheon with 20 members of his Army General Staff. But explained to the women he can't help them. It's out of his jurisdiction. After supper, the 4 women meet alone with Martha Washington, who had spent months visiting her husband. My research revealed that a member of Martha's extended family was closely related by marriage to Quaker exile martyr Thomas Gilpin, making an exchange of mutual sympathy and compassion highly likely. Hours later, Washington sent a letter to the Pennsylvania governor, ending with these 2 sentences. The women seem much distressed. Humanity pleads strongly in their favor. That's amazing. The Pennsylvania Council now feared that the dangerous example which the longer continuance of the prisoners in banishment may afford on future occasions had already given uneasiness to some good friends of the independence of these states. In the face of opposition, even among patriots, the governor and the council found that banishment upon suspicion alone only set a dangerous legal precedent. The Pennsylvania, as they did with, the exiles made their way toward home. As they did with the arrival of the Quaker Women's Mission in Lancaster, proceedings to release the exiled Quakers accelerated, and the prisoners of Congress were finally released April 28, 1778, after 7.5 months. On their way back to Philadelphia, the exiles lodged overnight in a home hosted by the then owner of this stone house outside of Downingtown in Edge's Mill in Chester County. My dad bought the house in 1937, and it's where I spent the first 6 years of my childhood. We are then left with these questions. How did the Patriots justify the seemingly blatant hypocrisy inherent in their treatment of Quakers? They complained that the British treated them like they were treating the Quakers. Were patriots guilty of overly zealous political chicanery? Was this a betrayal of their own cause? Or alternative facts maybe. Alternatively, were the patriots savvy strategists in finding a path to avoid potential collaborators causing worse harm from a tyrannical enemy, even if it meant using an illegal and unconstitutional ploy because so much was at stake? Did the ends justify the means? These are the hard questions that Pennsylvanians and citizens more broadly of the new republic faced in 1778. One final thought I want to leave you with: after being deprived of their liberty, unheard by their fellow countrymen, after what must have seemed like the most intensely unjust public calumny, punishment, and arbitrary rejection inherent in this episode, including the death of 2 of their closest colleagues, all 15 surviving Quakers made prisoners by Congress came home and stayed in Philadelphia. I hope prisoners of Congress will generate a dialogue on these many important issues, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments on the book. Yes, thank you.
Is this on? Okay. Did any of those Quakers who were imprisoned later sue for being arrested without cause?
They did not, but there was an unusual thing in the new government of Pennsylvania, which gave a committee of censors the right to review the executive's actions during every 7-year period. And in 1784, they declared the suspension of habeas corpus as unconstitutional. So they got, some comfort from that, but it was too little too late.
Two questions, if
Yeah.
I may. One, you seem to indicate that this was the final death knell of Quaker dominance or influence in Pennsylvania government. And so I would ask you to comment on whether I heard that correctly or not. And then secondly, once they were released and came back to Philadelphia, and presumably after the war, were they able to resume their prosperity and their relations? And that maybe is a whole other book.
So the Oath of Allegiance Act provided that if you didn't take the oath of allegiance, you couldn't vote. So for the next 13 years after the war until 1789, the Quakers had no vote in the colony they founded a century earlier. They went through a period of self-interrogation, and two Quakers who collaborated with the British during the occupation were convicted of treason and were hanged. Thousands upon thousands of people asked the Executive Council to commute their sentences. They said, we can't do it. We have to make a stand somewhere. Otherwise, people won't do what we ask. So that's where that stands. What was your second question?
Were they able to resume their prosperity, their business connection?
Right, right. So in 1789 or 1790, Henry Drinker got elected to the to the Council of Philadelphia, and so did Myers Fisher. And Myers Fisher was involved in negotiating the lease for George Washington to take over that place, that house on the corner down there. So he was in a position of public trust. So the Quakers regained their footing, but they weren't so active politically as you can imagine. And they sort of ignored this for the next 100 years while they worked on their education, their abolition, and their other things that are part of American life. They taught us all about protesting and about civil disobedience and conscientious objectors and all those other things which are inherently American. So they became part of the new republic in their own way. Yeah. Other questions?
You said they were sent to Virginia. Why Virginia?
Aha.
And rather than just being put in prison here? And was it a prison they were in?
No, okay, I'll explain it. So they were sent to Winchester, Virginia. Winchester and Fredericksburg, Maryland, were both places where they sent POWs, prisoners of war. Winchester, Virginia, had about 700 Hessians who had been captured both at Trenton and in Saratoga. And in Saratoga, New York, they were made to walk all the way to Winchester, Virginia, because they had no way of rounding these guys up and taking them in a wagon. That's what happened those days. And so the Quakers were not put in the barracks with the prisoners of war. They were allowed to pay for any lodging they wanted. So they lodged at a small hotel in this little town of 800 people called Winchester. And there they slept 4 or 5 to a room. And then when the proprietor raised the rent after 3 months, they looked for rooms with fellow Quakers in the surrounding area, and they all would come together twice a week for Quaker worship and Quaker business meeting, but they were in separate homes around the area. Well, if they escaped, they felt people would look at them and say, "Oh, they lied to us all along," and they did it. They whatever they were implicitly accused of, which was being traitors, we would think must have been right then. So they didn't dare leave, and 2 of them left, but they were the Never Quaker and one of the former Quakers. They left on horseback because they only had like 1 or 2 guards. It was on the gentleman's agreement, parole at that time. That was the basis of it. They were not supposed to go farther than 6 miles.
Did the Quakers actually invent the saying, make love, not war?
I don't remember much of what they said about sex.
I think that was George Carlin.
They should have, though, but they said, peace is the way. Peace is the way. Anyway. Yes.
Hi. When they were released, was there any news, or how was that explained publicly?
Was there any?
When the Quakers were released, was it in the newspaper? Was it discussed? How was it explained to the population?
When they were released, they wanted to be exonerated. We've heard that before. And the Pennsylvania government refused to exonerate them. They gave them a pass. And if you went to Washington and asked if you could use your pass to get back into the city occupied by the British Army, then they could go home. And they were very disappointed in the way they were treated all along. And the Quakers had even been told that the people in charge would ask Congress to get some money to reimburse them for the expenses of getting from here 200 miles away to Winchester, Virginia. But later they said, no, Congress doesn't want to spend any money on you guys. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Can you comment on any reactions from other famous Philadelphians? I'm thinking of Benjamin Franklin or others about what happened.
Well, Benjamin Franklin in Paris he had some young Quaker friends many years before, but he found the Quakers were quite insular. And Franklin wanted to be around people who wanted to do things for the community. And in ways, the Quakers did a lot of things for the community, but not quite to Franklin's liking. There were loyalists, the Allen brothers, who thought this was a travesty of justice. And other people, as I said, only knew a small slice of what was going on. So it was only in 1848 that one of the Quakers collected all the papers involved, including every step that the Executive Council of Pennsylvania took, and put all the evidence into a book and published it privately, called the Virginia Exile. And that was where I got all the evidence on this thing, it was an incredible book, but you had to figure out what it all meant. And a lot of it, there were Quaker diary entries right next to the government documents putting this through. But But by having that book, it was all the evidence and you could figure out what happened. But the Quakers didn't bring it up because everybody else was touting the general or the colonel in their family who had fought for independence. And the Quakers kind of, let's not talk about it. It'll just stir up bad feelings. And so this went unrecorded until Virginia Gray Vining in 1953 wrote a book called Exiles to Virginia. And it was a novel. And she used all the factual things of the exile, but she substituted one character for one of the real characters. She had a fictional character, and she put a fictional young lady in there so they could have a romance in Winchester, Virginia, and she would sell more books. But no historian could cite people to a fictional book. So even if what she wrote was pretty much very accurate, they didn't dare cite it. So nobody talked about this thing until I wrote my book. I have to say that I went to do some research at the American Philosophical Society. And when you do that, you have to write down on a piece of paper what you're researching. I put the Quaker exile. And a couple weeks later, the head of the American Philosophical Society, Patrick Spiro, called me on the phone and said, I see you're researching the Quaker exile. How far into it are you? I said, well, I'm 6 years into it, and I've got it all written, and I got to rewrite it. And we talked about, he had wanted to write about this in 2010, and he started by writing 25 pages, and then he got diverted to another project. I think he went to Williams College and taught there. And so he had in his mind, maybe I'll go back to that project. But he was kind enough to read my entire manuscript, which was 20 chapters, only 12 survived. 20 chapters over Christmas one year in 2018, and gave me 6 pages of comments on it and encouraged me to finish it. And I took 4 more years to finish it and to get Penn State to accept it. And it went through peer review. I had professors writing more 6-page letters on move this around, say this differently, or, so I struggled to do it, but after 9 years, they published it, and it's gotten pretty good reviews so far.
Just 2 things on Zoom. Juice says amazing research, and there's Jonathan said he bought your book at Art Street Meeting House when you made the presentation. He said it's an amazing book, fantastic research. But I have a question. Did you find any evidence about British soldiers during the occupation of them treating Quakers in a bad way at all, or?
Well, so when the British occupied the city, a lot of non-Quakers left the city. They didn't want to be in the city under British rule forever, however long that would last. And many of the Quakers remained. So the British officers would commandeer this house or that house for them to sleep in overnight and to have their dinners. And so they quartered themselves mostly on the wealthy Quakers. So did the Quakers have a choice whether to take them? Elizabeth Drinker said, well, they're telling me that if I don't get a British officer, some other ruffian from the British troops is going to come and demand quarters in my house. So she took this nice man who was kind to her, and he turned out to be a good friend. And she was quite taken when he died about 4 years later in New York after he had left. But in other places, the officer would come in and say, you can't come in the front door anymore. You got to go in by the side door. I'm in charge now. So there were some pretty bad relationships gendered there. But and the British forces burned down 10 Quaker houses in Germantown, and John Dickinson's house was burned, and other very wealthy Quakers' houses. So it was a stressful time, shall we say. Ernest?
In your book, you also talked about what is happening today that happened back then. It's called fake news. So it's like, if you don't understand the history of back then, you're doomed to repeat it.
Nothing's new under the sun, right? Yeah. And would you believe in the first year of the present federal administration, 18,000 petitions for habeas corpus have been filed with the courts by citizens and immigrants. And that is as many such petitions as were filed under Bush, Obama, and Biden combined in just 1 year of Trump. And you know he has designs on calling out some national emergency if he gets the chance. And with that, we'll be done. We will have seen the last of habeas corpus. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Great crowd. Oh yeah, books are available at $30, cash or check or Venmo even.
Right. That worked like that. Okay, so just a couple quick announcements. Got a little bit of time here. I didn't prepare my announcements, and Vince is not here to tell me the upcoming events. June 15th, I think, is do we even have anybody from the board here? Alex, do you know? June 15th, I think, is our Rittenhouse Town field trip. And then, so this Saturday is a certification exam, most important. If any of you are planning to take the certification exam, let me know tonight, because I actually already gave the exams to Denise, who's going to be proctoring. So, but I gave her one extra. So if you want that one extra spot, I had 3 people registered. So let me know if you want to do the certification exam. That's Saturday. And then, yeah, the 15th, I think, is the Rittenhouse Town trip. We have a guided tour there. I think next Tuesday, Jim, is your tour guide coffee break. Next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, 10 a.m., visitor center, if you want to meet and do the coffee break, just to gather, hang out with other tour guides, buy your own coffee. Saturday, June 20th is History Matters. I still need people. I think we have 6 or 7 people registered. We go to 5 spots in Independence National Historical Park and just tell stories to people. It's just free. You just wear a thing that says "Ask Me" in your lanyard and talk about Black history, underrepresented history, women's history, LGBTQ, whatever, so that those stories don't get lost, right? Oh, yes. Thank you, Vince. Happy hour at the Powell House after the History Matters. So History Matters is 1 to 4, June 20th. And then at 4 o'clock is happy hour at the Powell House, which is free, complimentary drinks and snacks. So even if you're not doing History Matters, you can show up at this happy hour. Anything else? Yeah, we said the tour. Oh, that's July. We had the book club for July. The next book we're reading is Grave Dealings, about the body snatching in graves, Tim Duisaki. So that's in July. So start reading that if you want to do that. And then we're having a visit to the Independence Seaport Museum on July 28th. So there's still time for that, but save the date.
Sorry, another Vince is giving me all the updates.
Thank you, Vince.
July meeting 1 week later on the 15th
Thank
with
you,
Liz
yes.
Cover of Ben Franklin's World.
Yeah.
which is a
So
fantastic podcast.
yeah, our July meeting won't be second Wednesday. It will be third Wednesday, the 15th. Because I think the second Wednesday is the 8th. So we figured right after 4th of July, people might be busy and whatever. And then Liz can't come until the 15th anyway. So Liv Covert, right? Is that her name? Liz
Yeah, Liz Covert.
Covert. She does a podcast. I haven't listened to it, but people rave about it. I think, do you want to say anything about it, Carla? Or you can come up here and say, because I don't listen to it. So like,
Well, when I first became a tour guide, I was like square one on history. So I needed to brush up on all of everything about early American history. And I started listening to her podcast, and she's really kind of what, gave me the confidence to go ahead and start doing tour guiding. But I mean, I've listened to hundreds. She's been doing this for like, I don't know, 12 or 15 years. And I've listened to hundreds of those episodes. And I feel like she took me from like 0 to 100, like within a matter of a few months. And so they're very accessible. She's always interviewing, authors on those episodes. And, if you want to dive deeper into it, she gives you suggestions for further reading and other episodes that are related to that one. And so it's like really comprehensive and interesting. And yeah, so I think she's going to be a good hit.
yeah, she's a celebrity coming to our meeting. So it's very cool. Yeah, so the meeting in July will be the 15th, not the second Wednesday. It will be the third Wednesday. And we'll have that in the newsletter next week. And
Jonathan says on June 21st, the Friends of Art Street Meeting House are planning a vigil from sunrise to sunset at the president's house. And he says he'll have more details soon.
cool. Okay, vigil at the president's house, June 21st. Very cool. Anything else anybody wants to add? Anybody know of events coming up they want to put a plug in for?
Don't you have that tour at the Comcast building?
Well, it's not for everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's limited. Well, no, they're taking the corporate members. We're doing a tour at Comcast for the corporate members next week. Yeah. That's nothing. Yeah, you're not missing anything, Ernest. Ernest is the one who introduced me to the Comcast Center. So yeah, you get a license to drive a Dragon. Yeah,
Anything
yes.
else for the comment section?
Oh, is it open on? So Comcast Center. So we're doing, to be clear, we're doing a tour on June 17th for corporate members of the Comcast Center because they just wanted a limited group first. They want to do this tour to introduce it to people. And then we're going to do another one in the fall that'll be open to all of the membership. And if you have not been to the Comcast Technology Center, it's free. It's open to the public. You can walk in, go up the escalator. You can go see the show in the Sphere. It's amazing. Or you can go online and reserve a spot. But usually, it's pretty easy to get spots, except on holidays. I like their imagination show, the regular show, the best. But right now, they're doing one on how to train your dragon. It's kind of like a VR experience. You're kind of like you're going on a sleigh, a flying, and you get dizzy. And I have to close my eyes because I get nauseous. But the kids love it. And then you make a driver's license. So you've been trained to drive a dragon. And then look at Ernest has got his license. I did not. I let the kids go. I didn't actually get one. Yeah, not yet. So yeah, so we'll do that next week. So look for that in the fall.
I just want to update too on the Federal Reserve Building in Philadelphia. They have a new exhibit about money, which I believe is free. So if you're interested in, no, not free money. And the second National Bank portrait galleries, I think it'll be open.
Yeah. And do you know the second bank, anybody know, is it Thursday through? Second bank opens at 12. 12 and closes at 4. Is that correct, Bill?
In the picture of
I can't possibly convey this to everybody on Zoom. I apologize. Wait, but let's get this. The second bank, I know it's only a couple days a week, Thursday through Sunday. Is that right? Thursday through Sunday. And is it, you said 12 to 4, is that right? 12 to 4, Thursday, Tuesday, Sunday, second bank, super exciting. July 1st, the first bank will open. I think Free Quaker Meeting House is open now. Anything else? Oh, New Hall, that's never going to open. Yeah. Yeah. No. Anyone else? Anything they want to? Just get Ernest says just get the Gazette at the Visitor Center. Get the Parks Gazette. So cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Zoom people.